I kind of started coming into my queerness a little bit more, and I identified as pansexual. Um, and that combined with all of the experiences that I'd had with, not feeling really welcome there. And then for other reasons, I started feeling less welcome. Like I always felt like the odd one out
Mm.
with how strictly gendered the church is. I never really felt like I fit into that. And those feelings, as I sort of came into my queerness in terms of my sexuality, started kind of like coming out in more gendered ways of just like, okay, so maybe I'm not cis actually. Maybe I am
Mm.
non-binary. Maybe I am identify with some femininity and a little bit of masculinity. Maybe I'm gender fluid, and just kind of experimenting with those thoughts.
And was this all
Eh,
happening during your marriage?
yes,
Yeah.
this was all happening during my marriage. It came to a head like right at the end when I kind of realized that I'm not really attracted to men.
Mhm.
And I was married to a man, so obviously that was a problem. And that was honestly kind of the thing that really cut the cord for me was the way that my spouse at the time was reacting to all of this. At first it was fine. We agreed to open up our marriage so I could experiment with dating women and non-binary folks because it was something that I felt strongly about, um, wanting to have this experience so that I could, know.
Right, right.
And yeah, it was all well and good until it wasn't suddenly, and I can't blame him for that. He changed his mind. That's fine.
Yeah.
Um, but it didn't end up all being well communicated all sides around. We both had our own mental health problems,
Mhm.
and neither of us grew up in like super great communicative homes. So
Right,
there was a
right.
lot that went into that, but that's neither here nor there. The spirituality aspect, just like, um, it just coming into that queerness really just brought it home that, it was no longer my spiritual home. It was no longer
Mm.
something that was doing any good for me, and it was doing more harm than good to stay.
Right.
So I left.
Yeah. And what was your first experience with drag? When did you first see or were introduced to drag?
Um, the first time I went to drag, the first time I went to a drag show was the first Pride I ever went to, which is like back in 2019, and I went with a close friend at the time. And I saw a drag show, and I immediately just kind of like something clicked, and I was like, that seems really cool. But with the things that happened over the next year, 2020, the end of 2020 was when I split up with my ex. It just kind of was not a priority to think about,
Yeah.
until one of my friends and I kind of got back in touch and reconnected after a few years of not really seeing each other. And we started going out to the bar to just, enjoy the scenery and see the drag shows.
Yeah.
And then they thought about it and they were like, I think I want to do drag. And I was thinking about it too. And I was like, I think I wanted to. And then they did their first show. And they were doing shows for a little while.
Mhm.
And then, they had a number idea that they wanted to do. And they hit me up and they're like, hey, I want to do this duet. Will you do it with me? I know you've been thinking about doing drag. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing drag now. And that's just kind of how it started.
Yeah. What was it that drew you to doing drag yourself? What took you from like being a spectator, if you will, to somebody who wanted to do drag?
Yeah. I've always been into performing ever since I was younger. It started with like church choirs as a kid, and I did like a little singing and dancing group that sang like Broadway and popular music from like the late 90s.
Mhm.
Um, and that was my jam. I was really into that. And then, I did choir in high school and marching band and theater eventually. And it just really brought out this part of me that felt very much myself, like
Mhm.
not in a way that I had ever really experienced before. It felt more me than me.
Mm.
And, there's just something about like getting ready for shows and the process of just like becoming something that felt different than what I was experiencing at the time. um,
What
that
would you have
really
called
drew me
that
to the performing
experience?
arts.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of just, I didn't really get to do a lot in my younger adult life. Kind of being a Mormon and a mom, I just didn't have opportunities. And I didn't bring myself very many opportunities because I was supposed to stay at home with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did finally see drag and have that experience of like feeling drawn to it and then having someone really pull me in and say like, hey, let's do this. Let's actually do it. Like
Uh-huh.
that was just kind of like what started it.
Right, right. When you identify as a drag thing, and would you like to tell folks who maybe aren't, like what that means to you as far as what it means to be a drag thing?
Yeah. Being a drag thing comes in a lot of different flavors, but like the most bare basic form of drag thing would be just like not quite a king and not quite a queen. Um, Anything in between, anything outside of those, um, drag things can present very femme like a queen if they want, or very masc like a king if they want. Um, but always just not there.
Right. And so maybe even like a non-binary type. I think for
Yeah.
folks who maybe are, like I'm thinking of like folks who aren't part of the queer community who might,
Mhm.
like be aware of kind of the masculine or the feminine or quote
Yeah.
unquote male and female or queen and king. And thing can be kind of a mixture of those or completely different, all that sort of stuff, right? What
Yeah.
what drew you what drew you to being a thing versus a king or a queen?
I just I didn't feel like being a queen and I didn't feel like being a king. And I felt like wanting to be able to do either or both if I wanted to without the pressure of like having to fit into one gendered box. Cause I do feel like more of me when I'm on stage than I am usually. Like that's kind of just like what my persona is. It's me, but more and sometimes different, just playing around with expression and going for more than usual.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm non-binary, so that was a very natural fit for me.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. And for you, I know like for me, I didn't start really living into my transness until
Mhm.
I started drag. How did one come before the other for you or?
They honestly kind of came together at the same time. Like I realized that I was non-binary sometime around like a little bit after that I was out as pansexual at the time. Um, but I didn't really start feeling it or feeling like I could express it in different ways until I kind of started distancing myself from the church
Hmm.
and really had more ways to just sort of express my gender without feeling needing to fit into a box.
Yeah.
Um, and then drag kind of just came along with that as I split from my ex and was able to just be independent and not have to fit a specific expectation.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. How is your family? How is your family with that? And that can be very broad, but
Yeah.
how would you say family interacts with you being a drag thing?
Um, yeah, honestly, my family took it pretty well. Like I'm not super um necessarily open about like what types of performances I do since
Hmm.
um sexuality is pretty taboo. But I actually got really, really fortunate with the family that I had when I moved back home with my family. Um, I expected them to not really be welcoming of me being queer or anything like that, but I had two closeted younger siblings who came out as non-binary on their own terms as
Hmm.
well, and my parents were surprisingly accepting. Um, and I think that like that was just kind of like really nice to just have that sort of foundation. And then when my mom at least found out that I do drag, she was kind of just like her main question was just like, um, do you do sexualized things or is it just more along the lines of performing? And I didn't really know what to say because
Yeah.
sexuality is just so taboo um,
Hmm.
if you're Mormon. So just was kind of like, yeah, I know, I just perform most